Oh, so nice, Craig. Hey everyone, this is Mike Dunn, and you're listening to Rethinking EDU. I'm here with my amazing co-hosts as usual, Matt, Julie, Janine. How's everybody doing tonight? Everybody doing okay?
Oh yeah.
Sure. Good. Yeah.
Janine, what's happening in your world these days?
Yeah, I'm just like managing my 3 kids' online schedules and my online schedules, and yeah, we're plugging away here, and we're still learning.
That's awesome to hear. What about you, Julie? What's happening with you these days?
Well, it's not always sunny in Philadelphia, but it was today. So it was fantastic. I attended a fantastic network gathering outside on my back deck today. So it was great.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because our episode is about networks. What? Matt, what's going on with you?
Nothing much. Just trying to break a record to see how many emails I can write in a day, and we're gonna try to go for 200 tomorrow.
Ooh.
Shush! Oh my goodness! And now the episode is taking a turn. First.
That's networking, right? Emailing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, we appreciate everybody tuning in this episode. This isn't actually going to be a full episode. It's going to be a little bit shorter than our typical 45-minute or so episodes. We're calling this a season prequel. In the upcoming season of episodes, we're going to be featuring information about networks of schools. And in this little prequel we're going to feature now, we're going to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say networks of schools. We're going to talk a little bit about the value of networks, and we're going to talk just a little bit in general about what you might expect in the next 3 or 4 episodes. So as we get into it here, let's just talk about networks in general.
Well, I think networks can be formal or informal. So what we've got going on right here with Rethinking EDU would be an example of an informal network. And I think it's beneficial to have people, finding like-minded people to generally bounce ideas off of. And even with the more formal networks, you're not having to reinvent the wheel with everything, especially in these times. People learn less in a vacuum, right? So I think just having networks, finding like-minded people, it's all a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a really good example of what you're talking about. This here, Rethinking EDU, of course. There's tons of opportunities out there for informal networks that I think are super valuable. Just earlier we were talking about Twitter as being a potential for informal network. Matt, I know you've got some experience with Twitter. How does one even use Twitter as an informal network?
I mean, Twitter's great, right? You can have the hashtags. You can put a hashtag and follow that conversation, or you can follow different people, interact with what they're saying. And what I really like about Twitter, the network that it provides, is the ability to collaborate with people, either through directly chatting or chatting about an issue, a topic, and following someone. I really like, the times where you follow someone, they have a really good idea, and then you can message them back, hey, I tried that out. And then you can have this sort of dialogue. And I really like that personal connection that comes from collaboration through networks. And Twitter's with technology, right? Technology has the ability to transform networks and allow us to talk with people we wouldn't have been able to talk to, even like 15 years ago. So it's really interesting to think about that.
Yeah, I've done a few Twitter chats in my life. I find them to be challenging because my typing speed maybe isn't that great and my attention span is like way too long for a Twitter chat, which are like these little blurbs of ideas that are just sort of like being spit out really quickly. What I found really useful, if anybody is listening to this and they want to get engaged in Twitter, it might be interesting for you to take a look at a tool like TweetDeck to try to manage your Twitter streams a little bit more easily. I found TweetDeck to be really terrific and helpful to kind of manage that in what can be otherwise a very overwhelming informal network. I know that there's some other tech tools out there that can kind of act as informal networks. Are y'all familiar with any of those tools?
I just know that Pinterest, people pinning things and following, things on that. Even Facebook, these other social networks, Instagram. There's all sorts of educators that are out there with their own accounts, and I know there's a couple different networks that I'm a part of with that. So yeah, just being able to use social media as a platform for being able to share, connect with people, like you said. Finding out what other people are actually doing, which I think is removing that piece of isolation. Sometimes you get stuck just being in your classroom, closing your door and just doing what you normally do. But there are people out there that are really leading the way in rethinking education and doing it differently. And it's a great way to...
podcast name drop.
I did it.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. There are so many people out there that are rethinking education, and those networks are super strong. So if you're a teacher in a school right now, or an administrator, or any sort of person working in education, look out there for networks of like-minded individuals, because I guarantee that if you're thinking something about education, there's bound to be a network of other human beings out there thinking along similar lines. That kind of segues into our next conversation here, which is really about networks of schools. And Janine and Julie, I want to call you out a little bit to talk about teacher-powered schools, who are going to be definitely featured in this series. Let's talk about them as a network. How do teacher-powered schools, work together in an affiliation?
Yeah, so the Teacher-Powered Schools Network, I think there's at least 120, probably more schools in that network. And that's really helped our school connect with like-minded people, as I said, who are committed to student-centered education and elevating the teaching profession. So that network has really helped launch our practice forward, how we organize and make decisions, and then also just sharing best practices for how we do things as a school. It's been really fantastic.
Yeah, and likewise, we're also members with Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools. So that, again, we're connecting with like-minded people that are going through similar situations. We understand each other, we can bounce ideas off of each other. So that's another helpful one for us too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know that there are really sort of limitless networks of schools out there. A few that we know of that hopefully we'll have some conversations with. Picture Learning. There's folks from EL Education. I know you all have other examples. Julie, you want to share a few networks that you know of that are doing really great things?
Yeah, I think one here in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania branch of middle level education, the PAMLE. The national organization is the AMLE. But I've learned a ton from that Pennsylvania branch. It's everything middle school. They're partnered with the National Forum to Accelerate Middle Grades Reform. And I've been involved with Schools to Watch. And that's a really forward-thinking, goal-setting designation for middle schools to keep pushing the envelope for middle schools to be on the cutting edge of education. So I've really gained a lot from that as well.
And Janine, what about you?
I teach science. So I'm actually a member of the Montgomery County Science Teacher Association, which is a local network of science educators. And it's just helpful to kind of prepare for science fairs and, any questions that you might have in regards of, teaching practices with science. There's always somebody that you can reach out to and be supportive with. So that's like a really small, local network, but they're great to get together with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about the different levels of networks that you can get involved in, right? The sort of micro level, which we talked about, the meso level, which is regional or mid-Atlantic, let's say, maybe even East Coast. And then there's just these sort of massive macro level education movements that are happening One of them that I want to point out for a quick minute here is called 100. I just became a 100 ambassador last week. So woo, that's super exciting. And 100 is trying to share innovations in education and inspire additional innovations in education around the world. So our group of ambassadors is literally from everywhere, from Brazil and India to Colombia to Germany and the United States and, Nigeria and Kenya. So there are literally hundreds of educators doing good work in 100 to share innovations in education. And again, the emphasis is on connecting with like-minded individuals. And we didn't point this out at the beginning, but I think it's something important to point out. For a long time, education has been a fairly isolating task for many teachers. Sometimes it can there's this joke, right, about teachers that you're sort of just working on an island, that sometimes you get some feedback from your administrator, sometimes you don't, even though there might be processes for feedback, especially after you get out of like your first or second or your third year, sometimes you just never hear any collaborative feedback from anybody. And so you close the door of your classroom and you're just sort of teaching your students, and it can be super challenging in that sort of environment. So these different levels of networks often can help you move your practice in new, innovative, sometimes directions, or just sort of allow you the opportunity to bounce those creative ideas off of. Now, one network that we haven't talked much about yet in this quick prequel is the kind of like conference or sort of like super macro level groups of educators. And I want to kind of dive into the tech world as an example. Matt, I know you and I have been involved in the International Society for Technology and Education. What's that network like?
Yeah, it's a great network. So like you said, it's a huge network. But the thing I like about it is they do regional conferences, right? They have these large conferences, but they do move around to different regions, and it's a good place to learn. Like they're bringing the most innovative ideas to the forefront. But another thing I really like about that conference is they're not only bringing forward information, but they're trying to push forward like ideals. Like they have these standards that they've pushed forward. And actually, ISTE has helped create standards across, the country for technology integration. And they've been really like forward thinking and progressive. So for such a big, large institution like this mammoth institution, they are trying to do cool stuff, even though, they can feel a little bit institutional.
Yeah, I attended the ISTE conference, and it definitely is like an intense experience. It's one of the largest education conferences in the country. When I attended here in Philadelphia, there was something like 60,000 attendees over 6 days. It was wild. I think it brings up this question of there are certain challenges that come along with networks, right? Not all networks are all sort of like rosy and gold. And I would love to hear y'all, just for a quick second, maybe share some of the challenges that you've experienced with networks.
Well, for me, I think it's just time. It takes a lot of time to connect with other people in your own school, and then also to have that added layer of connection outside your school. So that investment, I find, has always been worth it, but it still is an added thing to do on a teacher's list. So I just am I guess I'm choosy about which networks I have time to involve myself with, and then going forward, I try to select. I almost curate the networks that I'm involved in for myself.
Well, I think it's also important to note that every network has an agenda.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said there about educators' time. We spend hours and hours prepping lessons and doing other things that get us ready for doing our primary task, which is helping students learn, right? And we need to be wary of how we spend our time. And so I'm often thinking, what am I going to get out of this network? And I don't think that that's a selfish way to think, because you're investing your time, which for an educator a lot of the times is just as valuable as their actual financial contribution to something. And so I'm always saying to myself, is getting involved in this network really worth it to me? And I know that sounds maybe a little bit more negative than it's coming, but I think we got to be there really are maybe limitless networks, so we got to kind of be a little selective.
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to make a little confession here tonight. You know, I haven't really delved into networks as much as I should have. I mean, this conversation tonight and the conversations we're going to have, I think, is really helpful for me. Just personally, it's helping me see the power in networks. But I think I have an overly critical view of networks. Like, in my past, I sort of look at them as these like multi-level marketing companies. Like, I have really bad experiences with some multi-level marketing.
Ponzi scheme of networks, man.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't call themselves that, but that's how I've experienced it, you know. And I've sort of experienced different networks and different people. It's about like them just sort of spouting off and getting across what they want to say, right? And I haven't experienced that much collaboration through that, but that doesn't mean that there's not power. But I think I've lost out a lot by not being in powerful networks. Like, maybe I had a couple bad experiences, or maybe I'm just overly critical, right? But I think this is making me become aware of, like, you know, I need to invest and dive in and because I need to grow, you know, and that collaboration is really powerful.
Okay, so as we're thinking about the upcoming series, I want to get your all hot takes here for the end, right? First, let's talk about how networks have helped us rethink education. And then finally, let's get our plug and let's end this short little prequel episode and get on to the real episodes. So who wants to go first?
I can jump in. So I think for myself, if I think back to like my first year teaching as a rookie teacher and compared to like where I'm at now and the growth that I've made, I really do have to say that the network, joining these different networks, has aided me in becoming a better teacher. It's helped me learn about best practices and what are other people doing that are innovative and engaging for students. And that I've learned a lot just from being part of networks. So that's how it's impacted me.
I think for me, networks have helped me revolutionize the way I think about education. And growing up, I grew up in a pretty working class neighborhood in suburban Detroit. And I thought school was one sort of way. And I went to university and continued to think that school was one sort of way. Immediately after I left undergrad and went to graduate school to study history, I realized that I wasn't really super happy in how I was experiencing school. I student taught at a big picture school and got my teaching certification and realized that there were literally hundreds of schools in the country that were really trying to do education differently. And it completely changed my life and my way of looking at education. Without that experience and without having gotten dropped into that network of big picture schools, I had no idea that school could be anything than what it was that I had experienced it as. And so I can attribute my views on education directly to the existence of networks of schools.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Mike. I think that was well said. I think my connection with networks, they've given me the opportunity to look up and out and feel part of a movement to change the status quo in education, to realize that what I'm trying to do in my classroom is bigger than just my classroom or my school, and it helps me to understand the many moving parts in the education world, in the state, in the country, it gives me a space to keep me focused on the higher aims of what, we're trying to do in my school. So those are the bigger picture is what it allows me to have.
And Matt, I would love to hear your philosophical ideas about why networks might be useful.
Yeah, so the limited networks I have been involved with that have been positive, maybe it's boiled down to the incubator that we all were part of, and so that experience was just really powerful to be a part of a group of people, and you're thinking about ideas in a new way, and you leave that space, and you realize I wouldn't be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for this experience, this network, this collaboration, this momentum, this movement, and you feel like you're part of something. You're part of something bigger, yeah, but you're also at a different place as a result of being a part of that movement. So when I think about networks, when I think about it in a good way and maybe what it could be for me, I'm thinking about movement, I'm thinking about collaboration.
What do they say? Human beings want to be part of something that's much bigger than themselves, right? And I think that networks help bring some of that to the fore. All right, last part of the segment here. What are you plugging for this evening? Let's go, Julie, first. What are you plugging?
Well, I would like to plug, so I mentioned Mike and I actually attended a networking event today, a live webinar with thousands of educators across the country. It was called New Way Forward, for your Googling pleasure. The moderator is actually one of my favorite education thinkers. Her name is Katie Martin. And so I'd recommend her book, Learner-Centered Innovation, Spark Curiosity, Ignite Passion, and Unleash Genius.
Cool. Janine, what you got?
All right, I got another book recommendation too. It's called Sharing Mindsets, Where Classrooms and Businesses Meet. It's by Joy Rosser and Anthony Barber. Joy's a close friend of ours and is on the board for PAMLE. I really like how they kind of open the book there. They have a quote that says, what is the role of a teacher? It's no different than that of a CEO. And I just love that. I think that's very poignant. But so check out her book. It's on Amazon.
Awesome. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, the tech tool I've been using the most these days is Screencastify. It's a really simple, easy to use screencasting tool. It just helps flip the classroom. It's so simple, but you're putting the information in the hands of the students or the learner or the other teachers.
Awesome. And I'm going to stick on the book theme tonight. I finished for my second time around a book by Jeffrey Selingo called There Is Life After College. And of course, May 1st, as we're recording this, May 1st is coming up. And I help kids try to make decisions about where they want to go after high school. And this book is always in my mind when trying to recommend places for kids to attend after they graduate. So check it out. You can get it on Amazon. Jeffrey Selingo's There Is Life After College. And I think that's it. Thanks everybody for hopping in on this conversation tonight. I hope all you listeners out there are prepped and ready for our coming series on networks. We appreciate you continuing to listen. Hit us up on Facebook and take a look for us on Apple iTunes. Thanks, y'all.